Daily Solutions Podcast.
All right, welcome to today's show.
Hey, everybody.
That was Ashkahn.
This is Ashkahn. I'm Ashkahn.
And I'm Graham, and we're from Float Tank Solutions. And today we're going to be going over a question from one of our listeners, which is, what are the benefits and downsides of 60 versus 90-minute floats?
Okay, that is a good question. I should probably start this by saying that we have only ever run 90-minute floats and longer in our shop.
Yeah, we have no idea what we're talking about.
So yeah, this is like nothing but gut feeling and intuition and hunches is what's about to come out of our mouth right now.
But there are reasons that we've only ever run 90-minute floats.
One thing I like about 90 minutes over 60 minutes is that it feels a little bit more intentional or prescriptive in a certain sense, whereas our world just kind of runs on 60-minute time blocks, so it feels very arbitrary. Whereas when you tell someone your float is 90 minutes long, it feels more like you're saying that's the length of time we think you need to be in there to have the experience that we're trying to get you to have.
Yeah, and I think one of the concerns that goes on the flip side of that is that without the option of 60 minutes, people will just think that 90 minutes is too long because that's kind of their programming, is to accept these things in 60-minute blocks.
I haven't really found that to be true in our float center. I have had people call and I've picked up the phone, and as they're booking an appointment, they ask how long the appointment is, and I'll tell them, it's 90 minutes long. And they'll often say like, wow, that sounds like a long time. And I'll say, pretty much everybody comes out and says that it felt like 30 minutes. And they say, okay. And then they book their appointment. And that's usually the end of it. Like I've really can't think of a time that I've told someone it's 90 minutes instead of 60 and they've hung up and not booked their appointment as a result.
Yeah, it's one of the great secrets of being a float tank center owner is that what we do is so weird and no one knows about it. So they just kind of trust you inherently.
They shouldn't, but they do.
Right. I mean, so when they come in, if they say, 90 minutes seems long, just you telling them, I don't think it is, and you'll enjoy yourself. They're like, oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And kind of book a float. You can almost just tell them anything, just like, no, you're wrong. And they'd probably accept that as well.
Yeah, and I feel like people really, especially if it's their first float, I think people get some benefits out of 90 minutes that they might not in 60 minutes. Like just the fact that you can be in there past that kind of 45-minute mark that seems to be about where people kind of slip into the zone during their first float. They get a much longer period of time in that kind of floaty state. And I, again, totally based on no real data, just hunches, feel like they maybe will come back to float more often after just a single float when you give them that 90 minutes instead of 60.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that's always appealed to us, I guess, about doing the slightly longer floats, is just giving people that extra benefit that comes along with staying in the tank for longer and hopefully a better experience that encourages them to come back. And if you can't tell, this is our totally unbiased report on 60 versus 90s,
right.
By the way. I think you can see pretty clearly the pros and cons on both sides equally weighing out.
Well, the obvious downside is that you can't run as many floats. And there's no getting around that. Like, you would just literally will not be able to have as many appointments. And you don't charge 50% more for a 90-minute float that people are charging for a $60 float. So there's definitely some kind of direct and, very on-the-surface economic downside to it.
As long as you're rocking out and keeping a really high capacity.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, then if you're running a bunch of 60-minute floats, but you can't fill those anyway, again, it goes back to the question of why not just increase it and kind of give everyone a little longer in the float tank?
Right.
What about for places that aren't Portland and the bulk of the population wakes up, before 10 a.m., where maybe they run on a little faster timeline? Like, I hear that a lot, too, for New York or L.A. or something like that. People wanting to just go in and out of the tank, the customers, not the clients, and just be able to fit it into something like a lunch break. I mean, that's why even places we've stopped by tend to offer things that to us seem ludicrous, but apparently have been working out very well commercially, like 30-minute floats or 45-minute floats.
We don't see them a lot, but there are a few places out there that do it and tell us it's been going well. This is our very Portland experience, but I don't get a ton of people that I feel like are trying to come in quickly and like work this into their schedule. I feel like when people come to float, it's much more likely that it's a whole day that they have off and they have something like a picnic planned afterwards, and it's kind of the beginning of some big, nice, relaxing day they've planned for themselves, rather than trying to just like scrunch it in right away between two appointments.
Maybe that's because we're not offering anything that could be scrunched in between appointments as much.
Yeah.
Or maybe they just don't go as deep. Like in 90-minute floats, it kind of does bring you a little bit to this other realm, trying to do a 30-minute float. Maybe it just takes you a little bit less out of the day-to-day zone. And people are able to kind of sneak it in, almost more like a meditation break or something.
It's true. I was just talking to Tom Fine about this, actually, because he was talking about his research and how they did 45-minute floats in a lot of his research, and how some of this research in Sweden is the same thing, 45-minute. And Tom said they'd even done some 30-minute floats.
As a tangent, too, they thought we were crazy in Sweden when we were telling them that we were doing 90-minute floats when we first went over there some years ago.
Yeah.
Nearly every center over there thought that we were sitting at a dinner table, and they were actually telling us that we were crazy for doing floats that long. And over there, 45 minutes really is much more the norm. Okay, tangent over.
So Tom Fine suggested that perhaps there's different benefits that you'd get at the 30-minute mark versus the hour mark versus the hour-and-a-half mark. And if someone's coming in for something maybe more like shoulder pain or back pain, that 30 minutes might get them to the spot where they get the relief they're looking for, and like beyond that doesn't actually contribute a whole ton more. Whereas if someone's looking for a different type of benefit from floating, like it might take that full hour-and-a-half sort of time range to reach it. So I don't know, and it was just his theory as well, but definitely an interesting thing to think about.
So you heard it here. We're not actually certain about anything.
That's right.
What about, okay, here's another one. Here's another one related to this. What about combo floats? So doing things that are 60 minutes and then sometimes doing 90 minutes, or running half of your tanks on 60, half on 90, and then the other half on 2.5 hours.
Yeah, it's mostly difficult to get around the logistics of something like that. Like if you have kind of a fixed schedule, all your floats are starting at, set times during the day, like all at 1 o'clock and then a whole another batch at 3 o'clock and another batch at 5 o'clock. It's really difficult to offer 60 minutes because if someone chooses 60 minutes, you're not going to shift your whole schedule structure around to shorten everything. So you're just going to get them out 30 minutes early, and then your float tank is just going to sit there empty for 30 minutes. And to me, that's almost a little bit silly because it would have cost you like $0 more to have someone stay in the float tank for that time. So there's that, and then having two different rooms that have different lengths of float mostly gets into difficulty with your floats not starting at the same time, which is hard for taking groups and for noise, making sure that like noise from one room isn't disturbing a float in another room.
Yeah, and that's a good lesson that people kind of going into this from the outside and those who aren't actively running a float tank center right now might not realize, which is that pumps in the float tanks are really noisy. Like it sounds like a jet engine kicking on in there sometimes, especially when you've been in a float tank and you're used to the quiet solitude. And that noise really, despite all the crazy soundproofing we do, actually just blasts right through the walls. It's very, very rare that we found a float center that can run a pump in a room, in a float room right adjacent to another float room and have that noise not just immediately blast over to whoever's in the other tank. So when we're saying about starting at the same time, that's a little bit of that reason is pump noise is just so hard to block out, plus the noise of cleaning and doing walkthroughs. It's just one of those challenges, again, that a lot of people first getting into this might not recognize as something that needs to be overcome if you want to run those different scheduled float tanks.
One of the ways we do at our center, we offer 2.5 hour floats as well as 90-minute floats. And the way we get away with it is we just have a time of day where all of our floats switch. So at 11 p.m., we switch from doing 90-minute floats to 2.5 hour floats. And we do 2 of those through the middle of the night, and then we switch back to doing 90-minute floats. And that kind of full switch over means there's no gaps in our schedule. All our floats still start at the same time. We have all that kind of, we don't hit any of the snags that I just mentioned, but we do offer multiple lengths of floats.
And theoretically, you could just build 2 totally separate float centers.
That's
and do
right.
60-minute floats at one and 90-minute floats at another.
And then you could let us know what the actual information is with real data and not just our random hunches.
People wouldn't need to trust our random off-the-cuff information that we're spewing out here.
Yeah, so that'd be good. Someone should do that.
All right. That's the benefits of 60 and 90-minute floats.
All right, if you guys have any questions of your own you want us to answer, just go to floattanksolutions.com/podcast.
And we'll see you next episode.